I do remember vividly the first time I did a clay paw print, just realizing it's a pretty special responsibility. It's tough because the harder we love these pets, the harder it is when they go.
Welcome back to Tales of Fluff. I'm AJ.
And I'm Emily. Today's episode is a little different, but one that touches something all of us with pets will have to face eventually: saying goodbye.
We spoke with Jake from Pet Passages, a company dedicated to helping families navigate the end of life journey for their beloved pets. What he shared with us was more than just business, it was deeply personal.
It really was. Now, to begin, we asked Jake, how long has Pet Passages been helping families through the end of life process with their beloved pets? And what inspired him to start the journey?
So, Pet Passages specifically started in August of 2011. Now, my journey with Pet Passages only started about 18 months ago or so, but Pet Passages itself is a national brand with around 20 locations all over the US. And as far as my journey and my interest, I've had pets for a long time, for much of my life, so obviously that's been an impactful. But really, what it was is I was working a pretty typical corporate 9 to 5. I was in sales. I was actually doing pretty well in kind of a remote sales role. But the reality was I had stagnated a little bit and it wasn't particularly fulfilling. It was fine. It's a living, but it wasn't super fulfilling. Then I had some friends who had been successful business owners previously reach out to me and say, "Hey, we're looking at this business, Pet Passages. We really like the concept here and just want to see if it'd be something you'd be interested in getting involved in." And it was just kind of perfect timing that allowed me to look at something that would be much more fulfilling and much more meaningful, and yet also allow me to provide for my family. So being able to help people in many instances on one of the worst days of their life, certainly a top 5 or a top 10, right? Obviously has its challenges, but also has some really, really huge impact and makes the work that we do day to day that much more fulfilling.
Jake's story started with a shift from a 9 to 5 sales job to helping grieving families through one of the hardest days they'll ever face. It's not a small change, but it's one that came with meaning.
And for Jake, that meaning became clear the very first time he made a paw print in clay. That moment hit different because it wasn't just a keepsake, it was a promise.
A promise that their pet would be treated with the same love and care in death as they were in life.
Yeah, like we talked about, Pet Passages is a national franchise. So I went out and did training with the founder of Pet Passages. And I remember vividly, and I do not have a great memory, but I do remember vividly the first time I did a clay paw print and just realizing it's a pretty special responsibility to be able to collect that keepsake for that family and for this beloved pet. And then I remember the first time I was in someone's home. Again, this was with the founder and as a training opportunity and learning. And they had just had their beloved childhood pet put to sleep at home. And then we came in and really gently and respectfully took that pet into our care. And just remember seeing, obviously, there's a lot of emotion on the family's faces too, but also the appreciation and knowing that we were going to take really, really good care of their childhood pet was really special. So yeah, I do remember those really early, those 2 instances in particular. And then obviously over the course of the past 18 months or so, I've personally helped over 1,500 families, which is really pretty crazy, amazing.
He talked about helping over 1,500 families in just 18 months. Those aren't just numbers. That's 1,500 stories and 1,500 goodbyes.
That was amazing to hear how many families Jake has helped. Even though Jake has only been with Pet Passages for a short period of time, it really shows the kindness and the dedication that Jake has towards helping families through such a devastating time. So now all of us who have pets know that our pets are our family, right? They're excited to see us when we come home, and we're even more excited to see them. So we wanted Jake's viewpoint on why does he think it's so important to treat pet loss with the same respect as human loss?
It's a great question. I think the reason for it is we've seen a shift, especially recently, depending on how recently you want to talk about it, but certainly in the past 20, 30 years, pets are literally part of the family now. And I have people routinely say things to me along the lines of, I've experienced loss in my family. I've lost family members. I've lost friends. But man, losing this dog is just about the hardest thing that I've experienced. And I really do think one, it's because they're part of the family and becoming even more part of the family. But I think the other thing that's so critical and so special and yet so challenging about it, I don't know if you've seen those bumper stickers that say, be the person that your dog thinks you are. But I think that's really it, that people are complicated and challenging, and those relationships come with a lot of different things. But man, a dog that loves you, a cat that loves you, just loves you. And there's nothing else there. Right. And so I think that's what makes it so poignant and so difficult when that companion of many, many years ends up moving on. It's really challenging in that way. And so I think it really needs to be treated with just the same level of sensitivity as any other loss.
Jake's answer was powerful, especially when he talked about how people and relationships can be complicated. But with pets, their love is unconditional. They don't judge whether you're ugly crying or you're celebrating your best day. A dog or a cat or any type of pet is always there to comfort you, looking at you like you're everything. That bond is so real, and we feel it too. No matter what kind of day we're having, our dogs are there, laying their heads on us or waiting for our attention with those big eyes. It's such a special connection. And that brings us to our next question. With so much information out there, some things are misunderstood. So we asked Jake, what's the most misunderstood thing about pet cremation?
It's a really good question. I think the biggest thing, and this is happening less now as there are more providers. I think that's a very good and healthy thing that this is an industry and not just a business, right? There are multiple people that provide these services, multiple entities that provide these services. I think the biggest concern, and this stems from some misunderstanding, I think the biggest concern is understanding, okay, how do I know this really is my pet's coming home? And just like is done on the human side of things, we are really careful about chain of custody. So when a pet parent uses our services, an account is created. Every time we make any sort of change, meaning the second we pick a pet up from their home or from their vet office to the moment that pet arrives at our facility, everything is timestamped to the account. And so, really, I think the main thing that's misunderstood is what is even happening? What is even going on? Previously, it's just my pet was euthanized at the vet, and then it's a black box. I don't even know what's happening. I don't even know what's going on. So how am I to know that this is my pet coming home? So the thing that makes Pet Passages really special and really unique is that transparency. Like I said, the Pet Parent Gateway allows people to log in and track their pet's progress and know exactly what's going on. Every pet that comes into our care is assigned a unique ID number with a physical ID tag. Think it's like a $50 size with a stamped ID number. And obviously that ID number is on the paperwork, it's in the account. So everybody knows exactly what's going on. But I think that's really the biggest thing that's misunderstood is what is the process? Where is my pet? What's going on in the meantime?
So, really, the most misunderstood part about pet cremation isn't the service itself, but about the process behind it. Families often don't know what's happening after their pet passes, and that uncertainty can feel overwhelming. However, hearing how carefully each step is tracked and handled shows just how much care goes into making sure every pet truly does come back home to their family. For our next question, we wanted to know about families who have experienced pet loss for the first time. And how does Jake help them get through it?
We do see that very frequently. It is interesting too, because we also, even in my short 18 months or so at this location, I have seen the same families a couple times actually. And that's hard to see too. I think no matter the situation, the loss of a pet is hard. But to your original question, guiding families through, I think some of the things that often come up is, how do I talk to my kids about this? Or interestingly, too, how do I help my other pets understand to some degree what's going on? Right. And so we have things that we talk about, like I said earlier, a little bit kind of alluded to this. In home euthanasia is becoming a much more sought after service because it allows that closure for the pets that are around the pet that is passing on. You know, we can communicate to our pets as best as we can, and they are limited in how they can communicate with us. And so, even though it's clear they're keyed into some of those things, we don't really know what they're experiencing as they're seeing one of their furry friends, one of their furry family members move on, right? So as we're working with people, as we're helping people, maybe whether it's their first time or not, the really critical thing is just going slow, letting them guide the process, letting them ask the questions. You know, we have a few things that we do really consistently. You know, we have a spiel of sorts that we're going to go over the really critical information every single time, basically wrote. But at the same time, we are also very flexible and guiding families in the way that they need to be guided, answering questions. I've had some people ask for a tour of my facility. I'm proud to be able to just give open facility tours. So I've had people want to see what it looks like in the back and at any time. And I am happy to have someone come in the back and show them around and explain to them how our equipment works, explain to them the ID tag number, like we were talking about, and how all of that ensures that it's their pet that's coming home. But really, I think as we consider helping people through this, it's allowing them to ask the questions that need to be asked, allowing them to be present and experience and really go through it with somebody who is just kind of guiding them through it and who, for better or for worse, I'm seeing this every day, right? So I have the opportunity to say, I've done this before. I can help you through it and answer the questions you have.
What really stands out is the compassion in that approach. Meeting families where they are, giving them time, and letting them guide the process creates a sense of trust and comfort in such a difficult moment. That patience can mean everything when saying goodbye.
One story that really stood out was a family who just couldn't decide when it was time. And instead of rushing them, Jake gave them neutral ground, patience, and respect.
Because sometimes the kindest thing isn't advice, it's just being there.
There is one in particular that I vividly remember. Obviously, I'm not a veterinarian, but we have amazing veterinary partnerships, both with brick and mortar vets as well as mobile vets. And that also allows us to coordinate euthanasia appointments in our facility. We have a beautiful facility where we have a couple of, we call them rainbow bridge rooms. I don't know if you've seen the poem, but if you just Google Rainbow Bridge Pet Loss Poem, there's a really sweet poem that's uncredited, but we use in our facility and a lot of other places too. But in any case, these Rainbow Bridge rooms are really beautiful, kind of neutral ground. And it allows people to have their pet put to sleep in a place that isn't the vet, that also isn't their home if they don't want their memory there, but is still a warm and inviting and comforting location rather than, you know, the clinical kind of that side. Now, the reason I bring that up is to say we're having a euthanasia in our facility, and I remember this family pretty vividly, and it was really, really tough for them because the family was a little bit divided on what to do. This was their childhood dog, but had clearly was of an advanced age, and the pre-existing health conditions that their pet was experiencing was making quality of life a real challenge. And the thing that we did, there's only so much you can really do, but the thing that we did was we just allowed them that neutral space, and we didn't rush them. We were happy to answer questions, but at the same time, we're never going to answer the question of, is it time for me to let my pet go? Right. Obviously, there are some veterinarians who are more willing and more comfortable to make those distinctions. And I don't think that's inappropriate. However, we, in this case, really just felt it important that the family be the one to come to that decision and that we just guide them through and allow them that space to grieve and to have a hard time. And then from there, we made sure that we did our job and treated their pet with the utmost dignity and respect so that they knew that no matter the other things, they knew that at the very least their pet's remains were being treated just as grandma would be, just, you know what I mean? Just as anybody else who's a loving member of the family.
What stays with us from that story is the respect shown in such a heartbreaking moment. Giving a family space to come to their own decision without pressure allows love to guide the choice. And knowing their pet was treated with the same dignity as any beloved family member brings a sense of peace, even in the middle of grief. And then we moved on to another touching point: the things people send with their pets: blankets, toys, even handwritten notes.
We see that all the time, and I love to see it. There are really common ones. Obviously, the blanket that they came home in, their favorite toy, that kind of stuff. And I always love to, and I'm always happy to accommodate those requests when they say, I really need this blanket to stay with Daisy, or man, this is Bruiser's favorite toy. It's really got to stay with him. So we see that kind of stuff. But I've seen some other really beautiful things. I mean, I've seen people bring their, micro exotic pets, right? You see like hedgehogs or others of that sort. I've seen people bring just the most beautifully put together boxes with their pet and, or it's just this beautiful ornate, kind of florally designed box that had this gold embossing, and the whole box itself was filled with flowers. And the family, I think, even said to me, yeah, these flowers were from a spot local to us that had some other, significance to it. So it's really beautiful to see those kinds of things. I also love seeing people print out pictures. They'll have, Polaroid pictures of the pet and their family, which is great to see. And then I also have seen vets go above and beyond, and vet techs go above and beyond, where one of my vet partners, they have in their goodbye room, they just have a bunch of colored hearts that they give to the families to write a little note on. And so that way, those messages of love and of appreciation can go with their pet and be with their pet, in those really challenging final moments and, as well wishes on. Right. So I love to see it. It's really a special thing. And it really gives me insight too into the families. And it's a wonderful way to see just how loved these pets are.
I absolutely love that story about the family that filled a box with flowers and golden embossing. It wasn't just a send off, it was a celebration of life.
Those little tokens say so much about the love people have for their pets. It's more than just an item, it's a final act of care. Jake also touched on something that really hit home for us: the loneliness that some people face when they say goodbye alone.
When people are surrounded by their family, when they don't come in alone, I do have at least some hope that they have the resources and, the support system that they need in order to grieve in a healthy way. Now, we do see people alone, and I've seen there's, one in particular that comes to mind where I've helped a gentleman twice in the past year and living in, let's just say, pretty challenged circumstances. But, I was really glad to be able to be there and, like we've talked about, answer his questions with dignity and respect and really help him through when it's clear. I mean, these dogs were just his whole life. And so the thing that I think was really important in that particular case was we did what we could to go above and beyond. We don't always do this, but I made a concerted effort to actually do a personal delivery back to his home because his vehicle was out of commission once his pet was ready to come home and he couldn't come pick his pet up. And so I said, no worries, I'll get him home DLC in a couple hours. And, did that personal delivery so that he knew, he could look me in the eye and he could see that I was taking care of his pet and see what that meant when his pet came home. And we do also, there's a wealth of information, right? We have some grieving resources on our website as well. There's also, we do free obituary hosting essentially. So we call it Pet Tales, where somebody can write a little blurb about their pet and upload photos, which can be a really healthy way to get that out and immortalize in a certain sense their pet story. And that can be a really helpful thing. So as we're helping people, especially in a sensitive thing where we know it's just one person alone and maybe they don't have the support around them that would be helpful as they're grieving, we just try to connect them with as many resources as we can.
Jake, that's amazing that you did that. I'm sure that means everything to that man that lost his pets. And I mean, we see it. So we live next to a senior living assistant home.
Mm. Mhm.
And on the weekends, on the holidays, the parking lot is emptier. The workers are gone, minimal workers are there. There's no family visiting them. And we have maybe 2 or 3 elderly people that just walk around the neighborhood with their pets. And it brings a smile to my face watching them. But then it's like deep down, I'm like, man, it's gonna hurt when they lose their one dog because no
Yeah.
one that their family either doesn't spend time with them or maybe all of their family is gone. So I completely understand when you know a person loses their one thing that they love so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
For our next question, we asked Jake if there's ever been a family or a pet story that's really stayed with him long after.
We talked about that individual just a moment ago. That's one I remember. I think the ones that leave a lasting impression are the ones where you relate to it a little bit more. It's a little closer to home, as it were. One that really comes to mind is I'm pretty active in my church community. And when I actually became involved in this current job, I actually moved basically across the country in order to pursue this opportunity and do this work. And so the reason I bring that up is to say that my church community is really important to me. And it's a really helpful way for me to meet people, build relationships, and make friends. And, someone who I had become close with and served with in the church, one of the first things he said to me when I met him and told him why I moved out, he said, "Man, I've got this dog and he's got this thick Southern Oklahoma accent. He said, I've got this dog, and when this dog goes, I'm going to be a wreck." And he says, "I didn't even want this dog, but my girls convinced me, and we got this dog. And man, when he goes, I don't know what I'm going to do." And when I got that phone call, it hit very differently. And I had been doing this work for several months at that time. And yet, seeing those tears made an impact. And it was very different because this is someone I knew and I had seen, totally happy and go lucky and buttoned up. And then to see him and his wife pretty unknown about this situation really brought it closer to home for me. And, it was so tough to see them lose their pet, but I was really humbled and grateful to have that opportunity as well to be able to help because it really solidified for me that I need to treat every single pet that comes into my care and into our care at our facility as though they're family. So that's one that really sticks out for me. And of course, their response afterwards and love and appreciation for how we helped them. It was just beautiful to see. And that is something that I do remind myself of on the hard days. And we really do make a difference. We really do help people. There was another one, like I said, I moved from out of state. So at one point, my dad actually came out to visit me. I'm lucky that my dad and I are very close. He came out to visit me, and it just so happened that we had somebody they came home, forget the details, but I think they came home from a long day of work and they just found their dog had passed away. And so in tears, they're calling me and they said, "I know you're closing here soon. Is there anything you can do?" And, we do offer after hours services. So we were, they were just fine with that. We were able to coordinate an after hours, and my dad came out with me and actually helped me take this pet into our care. And seeing these people's tears and helping them understand the process and feel a little bit better, knowing at least they knew it was their pet's ashes that was coming back. My dad looked at me and said, "Wow, you are really helping people." And that was just such a special experience. And I knew and I have known that we help people and that it's important. But it was so cool to have someone who I love and respect and whose opinion I care about turn to me. And it's clear that the light bulb had gone on for him as well was really cool. And, I remember when we lost our childhood pet, I know that, that my family having gone through that my family already recognized the value and the importance of this type of work that we do, but it was really special to be able to share that moment with my dad and have him see what I do, on a day-to-day basis. And so that'll stick with me as well.
Being alone saying goodbye to your pet, definitely if you had the pet for years or even decades, that has to be just heartbreaking.
Especially when the pet is the only companion they had left. That story about the man Jake personally delivered ashes to, that one really stayed with me. And when the time comes, knowing someone like Jake is there to help, well, that makes all the difference.
It really does. Now, we moved on to our next point, which was more focused on childhood pets. And Jake brought up a very touching point that most of us probably wouldn't even think about.
One of my favorite things about this that I love to see is there are very common pet names, right? I see lots of daisies. I see lots of dogs named Max. There are lots of those. But then occasionally I'll get a really kind of off the wall name or a really silly name. And then it comes up that the reason why that dog had such a silly name or that cat had such a silly name was because this now grown adult in front of me named this pet when they were 6 years old. And now this is an adult in front of me and realizing that this pet was with them throughout their entire childhood and basically all of their adolescence and into adulthood. I think that's something that's really special and really grounds the experience of realizing just how much time has passed. The other thing that we love to see too, like I said, with those pet tales, are seeing the pictures of the pet growing up with the person and to see a little girl holding up a puppy and then see that little girl grow up and kiss her dog goodbye as she leaves for college. Again, it's super special to see those types of things. And it really is grounding to remember how over time, how impactful these pets can be in our lives.
This was such a unique and touching thing that Jake brought up about how pets' names really tell the story behind the pet. Because some pets have such unique names, you know that kid probably named their pet when they were 4 or 5 years old because it was just something easy for them to say at the time. And now that pet has went through that person's entire childhood, maybe even into college. And how amazing is that to see how impactful a pet can be on someone's life? So, as we know, Jake works in a very heavy hearted field. So, we had to ask, how does he take care of his own emotional well being?
It is heavy. Just about once a week, I have someone say to me, and sometimes it's more than once a week, but routinely I will have people say to me, I don't know how you do this job. I could never do this job. This is so hard. I don't know how you could do this. And for me, I find great satisfaction in knowing that I am helping someone who really needs help and is experiencing one of the worst things that they will in their entire life. So that is something that really keeps me going, is recognizing that I am truly helping people who are having just a horrible time, horrible day. The other thing that keeps me going is the love and appreciation that people express to us through this process is really special. And we don't take that for granted. That does keep us going. But the other thing too is I'm a whole person as well. And it's tricky because I do this every day, right? And so I wouldn't say I'm callous to it or desensitized, but there are a few things now that I haven't seen. It's rare that I have a totally different situation come through my doors now. But especially in the beginning, it was so helpful to me to come home to my own pets and to give my cats a little squeeze and just be reminded this is important, what we're doing, and to really appreciate and recognize the value of life and how fragile and how beautiful and how special it is to be able to share these bonds with pets. And the other thing too, I mean, like I said, I'm married. I have an amazing partner, spouse, wife who is just so supportive and so incredible. And we just became parents earlier this year. And so that has been another thing that is a driving force for me of, being able to obviously provide for a family and also know that the work that I'm doing is helpful. And when I get to come home at the end of the day and spend time with my family, it really does help keep me going.
Jake's answer shows the balance between the heaviness of this work and the meaning it brings. Helping families through their hardest moments gives his work purpose. And I think it's so amazing that he brought up his family and his own pet. Definitely being in the emotional field that he works in, having that support and motivation, I can see why it would mean everything.
And when we asked about grief, how to help someone through it, Jake said something simple but powerful. It's okay to feel it, to not rush it, and to know you're not alone.
That reminder matters, especially for people who feel like no one else gets it.
And if you're listening right now and you're grieving, Jake wanted you to know this. The pain that you feel, it's because the love was real.
I don't know that there is a blanket statement that I could share that really would encapsulate, because it is such a personal and unique and special thing. I do think, though, I would want people to know that there are people out there who can help, and whether that's a family member, whether that's someone like myself who actually does the work and assists with aftercare. But I think it's really critical that for people who are going through grief and going through a hard time, to know that it's not forever, that there is still other really beautiful and wonderful things. And that at the same time, there's nothing wrong with experiencing that grief. And it's actually very healthy. Something I routinely share with customers as we're having these conversations. It's tough because the harder we love these pets, the harder it is when they go. And so those pangs of grief, that loneliness, that discomfort is a reminder of just how beautiful that time was. And in some ways still is, right? We have pictures, we have memories, all that kind of stuff, right? But like I said, I don't think there's a blanket statement. Everyone's situation is different. For those who have family or close friends who can rally around them, that's a beautiful thing that I'm always going to recommend. For those that don't, I still think it's important to feel those feelings, to experience them, and to find other, healthy coping mechanisms, other ways to process grief. And frankly, there are some awesome resources now that just didn't exist. I mean, there are Facebook groups like crazy assisting with people who are going through it, just finding groups of people who are out there. So really, I think, to your question here, I think the one really critical thing that I would want anyone to know is that you're not alone, that there are lots of people who have experienced this very same thing. That doesn't make it better in the moment. And that's why I've said I kind of hesitate to give a blanket statement to this, because it is so personal. It is so unique to every individual, but you're not alone. It's going to be okay.
Now, at this point, you might be thinking this is something you want to do. And we see why. Helping families through one of the hardest days can really be rewarding. And how Jake handles it with kindness and empathy really is inspirational. So we asked Jake, if someone listening right now wants to start working in the field that he does, what advice would he give them?
There's advice on a couple ends, that just kind of nuts and bolts, maybe logistical advice is look around, talk to vets in your area, see who they partner with for their aftercare, and see if you can get a resume out, right? I know that most business owners are constantly looking for people who can add more value to their team. The other thing that I will say too, that is really cool about what I do, that is really special as a business owner, is recognizing that, well, let me say it this way. It is so much easier for me to hire people with the shared vision already instilled in them. Everyone who's ever worked for me in my current job has experienced pet loss. I've experienced pet loss. And so because of that, there's that shared understanding, and that shared I get it. The pet industry is a really cool industry to be in for a lot of reasons. And I think that this kind of aftercare piece can be kind of forgotten or overlooked, just because, like we talked about earlier in the conversation, it is a little bit of a black box that people don't know too much about. So I would say, yeah, look around and see who the vets in your area are working with. And the other thing too, like I said, is if this is something that is interesting to you, and you're a kind and an empathetic and a compassionate person, you're a good listener. You're not afraid of helping people through their tears sometimes, then there's a lot of good that you can do.
His answer? You don't need to be fearless, just kind, empathetic, willing to sit with people in their grief and remind them they're not alone.
Because this work, it's not about fixing people, it's about walking with them.
A massive thank you to Jake for everything he shared with us this episode and for the work he does that most people don't even realize needs to be done.
And to everyone listening, whether you've said goodbye already or are just holding your pet a little closer right now, we hope you found some comfort and knowledge in this episode. We will also be leaving Jake's information in the description below so that you can go check out Pet Passages and see their incredible work they're doing helping families say goodbye to their beloved pets.
We're not here to ask for likes or shares. Just this. If this episode touched you, take a moment today and honor the bond you share with your pet. Maybe it's a photo, a walk, or just an extra long cuddle.
Until next time, remember, love doesn't end when life does, and some of the quietest goodbyes leave the loudest echoes.